This episode of Around the Layout is brought to you by Weather My Trains. Hey, are you like me and the thought of doing a DIY weathering job on an expensive engine leaves you in fear? It's time to call in Rob Arsenault at Weather My Trains. Do what thousands of satisfied customers have done and let Rob help you notch up the realism on your layout with beautifully detailed weathering on your locomotives and rolling stock. To see what Rob can do for you, check out his website at weathermytrains.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Around the Layout, where model railroaders come to tell their story. My name is Ray Arnott. So glad you could join us. Joining me on this show, coming to us from Palestine, Texas, Devin Jackson. Devin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ray. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, Devin. It's good to see you again. We got to meet in person during the 2023 Texas Express NMRA National Convention. Don Irace, Mark Herrick, and myself took the trek down to Palestine, Texas to check out your layout, and we met you and your son in person and had a great time.
Yeah, it was. It was great to have y'all down here, and apologize for it being so hot, but that's just the way it is in August.
Well, I didn't think it was all your fault, and you certainly weren't in control of it, so I didn't blame you a bit, but fantastic hospitality you offered us as we got to tour around the Mesquite Belt layout, and you learned a bit about it, and I can't wait to share that story with the rest of the folks. So we're going to roll right into it. But first, I want to get to know a little bit more about Devin and your model railroading journey. So why don't we start by asking that question that seems to lead off. How did you get started in the model railroad hobby?
Well, it comes to me through my family. I had an uncle who was a conductor for the Southern Pacific out of Eagle Lake, Texas, worked 38 and a half years as a conductor, had his own assigned caboose, have pictures of me in brand new, clean Southern Pacific Jeep 7s and Jeep 9s. They were clean because they were brand new back in the early 60s. And so I just kind of grew up around trains, and I lived kind of between the Southern Pacific, Maine going out northwest of Houston, and the Katy, Maine going out west of Houston. So depending which way I turned pretty much out of the neighborhood was which railroad I could go rail fan back in the day. But anytime I could get my Uncle RC to take me to the train yard, we did that.
Oh, that's fantastic to have an uncle that has an influence on you like that and be able to see the prototype and have those kind of memories. Where was that yard? Where was that all located? Because, when you say Texas, I'm learning that that's just gets you in a very big ballpark. So what area of Texas was this occurring in?
So Eagle Lake is southwest of Houston. And it's about 70 miles outside of Houston. But he had worked all through different yards in Houston, but he got to hold seniority in Eagle Lake. And so towards the end, he was on a dedicated job that basically he could control his own destiny. And, it's kind of funny you talked about his influence. In 1983, when I graduated high school, I had this bright idea that I was going to hire out with the Southern Pacific. And Uncle RC was about 5 foot, about 140 pounds, and he walked up within about 18 inches of me, and he says, "If you hire out and you turn in that application," he says, "I'm going to punch you until I get tired." And I was pretty sure he was pretty dadgum serious about that, and I think he probably had some endurance. So I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to listen to him and not make him mad. And so I went into firefighting as a career, but trains are still my love, and anything railroad related, I'm always the guy that anybody on duty calls for and says, "Can I touch this? Can I not do this? What is this?" and so forth. So, yeah, he had a good influence both ways. And then I also had a cousin who was a working yard master for the Katy in Eureka Yard. So hence my influence with the Katy. So I had influences both from the SP and from the Katy, and just really could get access anytime I wanted. That was back in the days when things were a lot more lax, and people had a lot more common sense about not getting on stuff and whatnot and just taking pictures and whatnot. And,
sure.
just a great time to be a rail fan, and seeing the end of the first generation diesel and seeing the second generation diesels come, and all the Jeep 35s and 40s and 38s and all that. Um, and and trains had color, and railroads had pride, and they had different color schemes and different logos, and everything wasn't gray and boxcar red and gray, uniform colors like they are now.
Yeah, you certainly seem to have captured a golden era in railroading in Texas. You mentioned in the Southern Pacific and the Katy in their prominence in that area. When did model railroading start to work its way into your life?
Probably when I was about 5 or 6. I had the infamous 4x8 sheet of plywood, and I had a Tyco Plymouth switcher. That was my motive power, and then also had the infamous Tyco Santa Fe flat car that I think still to this day is one of the best. You look at what that car had on it back in the day compared to now, and it still will hold up pretty well. I mean, it's still a very detailed car with wood grain on the deck and everything, but that little Plymouth switcher has made many a lap, and one of these days I want to put a decoder in it and just, pull a heritage train from my youth that's not steam. And then my Uncle RC's wife, she gave me a set of Burlington Athearn GP35s, powered and dummy. Not that Burlington ever really ran into Houston per se, but they were bright red and they were cool. And those two engines of that Plymouth switcher made many a job growing up. And so had the layout. And then being in Houston, I was able to get into Gil Freitag, Stony Creek, and Western. And then there was another guy by the name of Ken Calking that had a pretty good sized layout within about 15 or 20 minutes of my house. And I was about 7 or 8, and we went over to Ken, had an open house, and I'm still real good friends with his grandson to this day. And he had the first throttles that I can remember that were something you could hold in your hand, and they were totally scratch built. And Mr. Calkin would come around. He was like, "Okay, Ray, you see this engine right here? That's your engine. That's what goes to this knob. And you turn the knob and the engine goes forward. You turn it more and it goes faster. You turn it a little bit back and it goes slower. And you flip the switch the other way and it'll back up. That's your train." And then about, 45 minutes or an hour, he'd come to check on you. And that was just unbelievable cool time to sit there and say, "I'm going to find a woman that's going to let me have this when I grow up, because this is too cool." And yes, I did marry that girl, and my bride loves trains too. And in fact, her first ever train show was the NMRA show in Houston in 1989, and I was actually at basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So every train show since then, until the show in Grapevine, she's like, "It's just not as big as the first one I went to." So,
wow.
But just being able to run a big layout, and just, even as a kid, they'll trust you to run a train, and they're keeping an eye on you, but you have no idea they're watching you. And you're running this layout that's, the whole size of the second floor of the house, and Gil Freitag's layout. And man, that was just, that just set the tone for what I wanted one day.
Yeah, look at the impression you can leave on somebody by trusting them like he did. Trusted you guys to just, here's the throttle, here you go. That lasted a lifetime for you. I mean, that impression that he put.
And I mean, like when I was running Gil Freitag's layout one time, they had a full dispatcher in the whole 9 yards, and he puts me in a siding, and I sit at the siding, and a couple trains come by me, and I'm starting to think I'm being left. I kind of got forgotten, and so I picked up the phone right there, and it rang back to the dispatcher, and I said, "This Santa Fe 297 extra, milepost unknown and siding unlabeled. Just want to make sure you haven't forgotten about me." And he goes, "Where are you at?" "Well, I'm in this site, and I kind of described him, and he says, "Hang on a second." He says, "Raise your hand and yell out in about 10 seconds. So all of a sudden, he makes eye contact with me, so he knows where I'm at on the layout. and I'm about 35 feet away from him. He was like, okay, stand by, Santa Fe. I'll get you lined out in here in a second. And the signal changed and the switch moved. And I was like, oh yeah, I've
Oh
got to do
yeah.
this.
Yep.
There's no doubt this is where I'm going.
Yeah, that's quite an impression at a young age to grasp all that. So you kind of give us a preview of the fast forward. You mentioned that you think you're going to become a railroader, and your uncle has a different opinion for you, and kind of guides you down a different path, and you go into the firefighting career. That seems to be a lot of stuff. I mean, I was a volunteer firefighter, your career, and trying to understand, or I have a basic understanding that, the time it takes and the effort it puts in. How did that affect your model railroading and your ability to do that as you're putting together a career as a firefighter?
Well, there have been times where the chief has walked into the station and I'll be in the middle of building a car or changing out couplers or something like that. And he'll look at me and he'll say, Lieutenant, is this what I'm paying you for? I'm like, no, sir, but it's how I deal with the stress of the job and all your memos. And it's what keeps me sane. And he just kind of laughs and he says, I'll try not to be so hard on you. And that's a good looking car. Go ahead, it's funny how the two industries go together. When 4014 was making its run through Texas, I happened to be at the fire station the exact moment somebody from Omaha called, and they're like, yeah, I'm so-and-so with Union Pacific Railroad. I need to talk to somebody about securing a water supply for our steam engine, Union Pacific 4014, the big boy. And we're going to be coming through in 12 months and I said, my name is Lieutenant Devin Jackson. I will be at your service and I will take care of anything you need. And so I was in charge of the water supply for when the big boy came and spent the night in Palestine. And
Awesome.
Ed Dinkins and I made really good friends. Ed Dinkins is an old SP guy, and he always has an affection for the Katy. So Ed and I really hit it off real quick. Plus, I had all the water he wanted, and so that was a wonderful time to be a fireman and have access to the biggest steam engine ever that you never thought would see run again. And both careers have really meshed really well.
I'd say, and when UP calls, and they think they definitely got the right guy on the other end of the line when they called for water. They got Lieutenant Jackson, who's more than happy to bring water out to a steam engine.
And the best part was we have an overpass that goes right over the junction where the line from Houston, the line from San Antonio come together. And I went to the police chief. I'm like, we need to close this overpass. He's like, why? I said, you don't understand what's going to happen when this thing comes. And he goes, oh, we've had big festivals here before. I said, no. I said, these are my people and they're coming from everywhere and you have no idea what's going to happen. And he goes, well, if you want to close it, let's close it. I lost track at 350 plus people on that overpass to get an overhead shot of the steam engine coming around the corner.
Oh, yeah.
And drones and everything else. They're like, man, whoever closed this street, that was a great idea. I said, you're welcome. You're very welcome. And safety is most important. And it was a great time. And in fact, a lot of our restaurants were sold out of food by 6 o'clock that day.
Wow.
They were they're like, we've never seen so many people. I'm like, these are my people. I told you they would come,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's that fascination, isn't it? It's just amazing the draw and how railroading in general just affects so many people and their passion for it. And that shows that.
We had a lot of octogenarians and very elderly guys that were out here in walkers and everything else. And they're like, that's an engine there,
Yeah.
And that took them back to the 30s and 20s and 40s, where that was their mode of transportation. And you couldn't go more than 20 feet before you hit somebody in their 80s or 90s telling their grandkids about when they rode a train cross country and this is what they look like. And they're not this cool, smooth looking diesel that, this is a living, breathing creature. And, it's just belching steam and fire and all that. And to see their passion they turn back into being a 25-year-old kid again.
Yeah, for sure. Probably things they probably never thought they'd ever see again. seeing a steam
Right,
engine rolling
exactly.
through Palestine. Yeah, that's I'm sure that was a grand memory for them, and history rebuilt for that whole memory.
Yeah, we've been real fortunate. We've had 844 here. We've had 3985. We've had the Centennial come through. We've had the E units come through. So a lot of times they'll overnight here in Palestine just because of the distance and whatnot. And we have the shops here, so if they need anything, they've got it. And the Mesquite Belt has hosted over the years some legendary hamburger cooks and hot dog cooks and feed and run trains and BS all you want and sessions and last till 11 o'clock or midnight, and I might have 30 or 40 people in the backyard from all over.
So the line that goes through Palestine, give us a little bit of a lay of the land. Essentially, you said UP, and where does it start? What's the main purpose of that line?
So originally it was International Great Northern, came up from San Antonio and came up from Houston. And then they merged just to the west of downtown, right on the western edge of downtown. And then they come together, and then that line goes to Longview, Texas, which is to the east of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, kind of halfway between Dallas-Fort Worth and Texarkana, which is at the state line. And then that line goes all the way up to Little Rock and points north. So you have a lot of cargo coming up from San Antonio and the automobile plants, all the stuff from Mexico and all that kind of traffic coming out. Then you also have all the traffic coming up from Houston, all the empty grain cars coming back from the Port of Houston and so forth. And a lot of manufacturing stuff going up and a lot of chemical trains going north to all points north of here.
Because I'm looking here on Google Maps and I see the way that it's almost like a C shape. You've got like a C of a line that comes around, and then maybe a little bit of a cutway, going from say northwest to southeast. So it's really interesting how it all lays out. Yeah.
The main that comes up from Houston at about milepost 85, it splits at what's called South Junction. So you have the old South Main and you have the new South Main. The new South Main kind of makes a big swing around the edge of the majority of the south and downtown area, residential area, and has a little bit gentler grade, a little bit gentler curves, a lot less crossings. And because there's a pretty good climb coming out of from Crockett, which is about 30 miles south. And it's a pretty good climb coming out of there. And if they don't have the right horsepower per ton, they will stall about 15 or 20 miles south of town. And that always creates some interesting chaos and mayhem in the yard and trying to find space to double over and the hospital train to go get power, more power to go get them and all that kind of stuff. And then the line from San Antonio comes in the southwest corner of town and kind of parallels US 79 through town, and then they merge, and then everything comes through downtown. And one nice thing about Palestine is our rail lines are very friendly to rail fanning. You can pretty much stay next to the track and pay something or get ahead of something, and not where some towns are not real conducive to rail fanning and whatnot, and ours is really easy to get around. And we have some underpasses, we have some overpasses, so if you need to jump on the other side of the train, you can legally, real easy with just know where the right overpass is or the right underpass, and get on the other side if you want to see something or whatnot, or get on the sunny side and whatnot.
I'll tell you what, the next time we go back down, I'm going to be going rail fanning with you, because it looks like you got a lot of good stuff in here. Just a quick look on Google Maps, and it seems like it's a really great area for catching trains. But
and the other thing cool about Palestine is we have the Texas State Railroad just to the east of town, and it runs from Palestine to Rusk. And my oldest son, Aaron, has a Google sheet that he's done, and the train pretty much runs at the same speed, leaves at the same time. So he can tell you within about a minute of what crossing it's going to be at. And that's an experience to have your 23-year-old be in charge of the rail fan vehicle, and you're like, okay, I've raised you, I've taught you right, and I'm just going to hold on. And I think he's learned everything from Dad, and both my sons are really good at rail fanning. And my youngest son Matthew, he is a human Google as far as if you want a picture and you want to find out something, he'll find it. And so between them, we make a pretty awesome threesome because they're in too much we can't do.
That's awesome. Awesome that you're able to share it. We're going to get to that. I want to get back to a little bit of your story as you're building into model railroading. We talked about opportunity that you had with your family, and you learned the prototype, and a little bit of the model railroading, and then obviously the opportunity to operate and get that into your mind. When do you start building something else on your own in more of your adult life?
Pretty much right after I moved out of the house. I had the ultimate bachelor pad model railroad layout in my den of my first apartment. And I was like, this is me. You get the layout with it, and starting another Plywood Pacific version 2.0. And then the cars got a little bit more detailed, and started kind of working because I was, I grew up building model airplanes and things like that. So my skills weren't too bad. I was airbrushing stuff, and then I had the opportunity. I was hired as a professional model builder for about 2 years. I worked for a model building firm in Houston. We did petrochemical models. We did environmental models. We did. If you've ever seen the movie Die Hard, one of my models is in Die Hard. I helped build a jet engine that's when they take Mr. Takagi upstairs in his last moments, he walks right past the jet engine and the Flying Butterfly Bridge from Frank Lloyd Wright. We didn't build the bridge, but that was my 15 seconds of movie fame. And nice. So the cool thing about being a professional model builder is all the scrap steel, all the scrap plastistrut, all the cutoffs that, I was the guy dumpster diving and trash can diving. And finally the boss just let me have he just let me put a paper sack next to the saws and everything. It was like Devin stuff. And Devin took home a bag every week and sorted it out of, ooh, this is going to be good. Or, and it was cut off scrap from a job. And Devin has all kinds of plastistrut and pike stuff and all kinds of stuff. So, I had lots of free material to kind of start building stuff with. And then I got married and got a bedroom all to myself for the layout, and it grew some more. And then had a change of locations and had an unfortunate divorce and married the girl I probably should have married the first time. And she said, this is great. And I think you need to have a depot and get all the trains out of the house and have your own spot. So we bought our place here in Palestine where we saw in half an acre. And so found some Katy Standard plans from 1929. And so we built a Katy Standard planned depot from 1929. It is a prototypical depot that is correct for Missouri and Kansas, because in Texas and Oklahoma, we had Jim Crow depots back in the day. Yeah. And I just didn't want to continue on that idea. So the depot that I built in the backyard is 20 by 40 feet. Pretty much the outside looks just like a depot. I think you would agree to that.
Oh, I do agree to that.
So we don't have basements here in Texas because our water table's too high. So, it's kind of cool. Not only do I have a basement, but my basement is above ground and it has a roof. And, I've got all kinds of stuff I can do on the outside. And that was kind of a cool thing to do. And did all the concrete work myself. And when my concrete contractor got here, he's like, do you want a job? No, this is real work. I want to be a fireman and do fireman stuff instead of this. Concrete's heavy. And it's a lot of work. So
that's right.
And my wife is all on board for it. And my wife's family were all carpenters and tradesmen. So there's nobody better to catch a sheet of plywood coming off of a saw than my wife. She is excellent for being on the other side of the saw catching stuff.
Well, I could tell how supportive she was even at our visit. She was, unbelievable hospitality and just her excitement in it. And she's got the Mesquite Belt logo stuff on as well, and definitely all about it. I want to kind of just put this on a timeline. So when did you start with putting the depot? When did that get put in your backyard?
We poured concrete April 15th of 2003. So the layout's been here about 20 years. And building an 800 square foot layout is it's not a sprint. It's an enjoyable journey. And I'm not one. Obviously, we have projects and so forth, but I'm not one to sit there and I've got to get done in 2 years, and just work myself to death and everything else. Plus, being a firefighter, we have budget concerns that we have to kind of work through. And my wife makes a great chief financial officer for the railroad and says, no, not yet, or yeah, let's go ahead and pull the trigger on that. She understands the total vision, and she was really instrumental. And we would go around to different people's layouts, and we wore the same shirts that had pockets. So we knew the height of those pockets. And so we would take a lot of pictures, and she's like, well, that's a little too low. And I really like this layout. So look at where the pocket is on the layout and here. So we can measure that distance wherever we went. And she really liked this and this layout. She really liked this and this layout. And I just kind of made notes along the way. And I'm like, I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that. And because she likes it, so it's going to happen. And she likes trees and she likes animals. And so we have lots of deer and trees and live oaks and stuff like that to kind of capture the flavor of Texas and so forth. And because everybody builds a layout differently for whatever. And we also looked at aisle widths and took into consideration some ADA capabilities. Not that anything at my house is going to be ADA, but, my layout is wheelchair accessible. We can turn somebody around 180 degrees within the layout at certain places. Because, being in the fire service, I'm one call away from being permanently, injured or whatnot. So I didn't want to get locked out of my own man shed,
Yeah, well, hopefully that's planning that'll never come to fruition, but that's
Right.
certainly neat that you did that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out something you've kind of highlighted. I think it's a key point of success is keeping your wife or your spouse involved, and it's amazing that you've married, like you said, the right woman who, supports all of this and is a big part of it. And not only just supports it, but participates. I think that it takes it to a higher level, but then you find ways to keep her enthused about it. Like you said, adding animals, having a thing. I know for me, I got to add a Target trailer. That's what I've been asked for. She wants a whole Target. She's not getting a whole Target, but I'll find a tractor trailer and put Target on there and keep her happy.
You need to get the guy down in Louisiana that makes the laser kits. I think he has a Target. If not, he'll make you one.
Well, again, I'm okay with a Target tractor trailer on the highway. I think that would be just enough. Them refilling the store after she's been there, kind of idea. But
one of the other things I think is really cool is she likes to find new map books, and like if we're going on a big trip, we have all the map books for that, and so she's kind of navigating and the next town that has it says there's a yard 20 miles ahead in this town and so forth. And then I've got the human Google machine in the back seat and he's telling me what street I'm looking for and whatnot. So it's really a finely polished machine that I'm really proud of because my wife knows she loves chessy stuff. So if we can find her something with the kitty, she's really happy. And South Haven, Kansas, just over the border from Oklahoma, has a pristine SD18 right off of I-35. That wow. Kitty is just too cool. And how many SD18s do you get to see nowadays? And it's all in original paint. It is just one of the coolest things. And when somebody first put that picture up on the web, everybody started going to this little town, population 253, and finally, I was talking to the co-op manager, and he was like, what is the deal? All of a sudden, there are people coming out of the woodwork. I'm like, okay, this engine has not existed for so many years, and that railroad has not existed for so many years. And somebody put it on the internet, and this is just like seeing a history piece out in the middle of the country, and everybody just wants a picture of it, And over the years, we developed a relationship with that manager, and finally one year we were going up for the Kansas City NMRA show, and he says, "Do y'all want to go up in the old elevator?" Sure. Man, what an education was that, to go up in there. And he asked us if anybody wanted to go on the man lift and go to the top, and we all said no, we're going to stand on the ground. But just the intricacy of how they did the grain back in the day, that was just, that's just a that's just a library experience of knowledge right there. And that was very, very cool.
No kidding. Great opportunities. And boy, this is a family affair. I mean, you talked about your wife and then the sons. And when I'm curious, how old were they when the depot was built?
Let's see. Aaron would have been 5, and Matthew would have been 3, and then my daughter would have been. I have a daughter from my first marriage, and let's see, she would have been about 14, and my daughter learned all about hanging sheetrock and driving sheetrock screws and taping and floating, sheetrock and all that. So, and now she's married, and she's turned out to be a very handy gal around the house. And in fact, growing up, we gave her tools at Christmas, and she turned out to be the only gal that worked at Bath and Body Works that she was the only one that knew how to put the displays together. And they would just put a Post-it note to save it for Karen, and Karen would come in there, and she'd be in the back building a display, and she's like, "These are the skills my dad taught. This is cool." So, she's turned out to be really the handy wife too, because she'll send me train pictures and whatnot. Now she and her husband are fostering some young boys, and it's all about trains now. And she's like, "This is like version 2.0 of my youth," and so it's kind of cool to see the next generation, take off with it. And so the youngest one is 5, and he just loves watching videos of the layout, here and pictures and whatnot. And he just thinks I'm the coolest dad of Karen that there is. So that's kind of cool too.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a good thing. And pretty neat for even your sons. And I really enjoy hearing, I'm close with my dad, so it's always neat to hear, some really good father-son stories. And boy, you've got one with this depot and the boys being young. And I mean, obviously the daughter was influenced as well, but just the fact that you've got this depot and you're doing the model railroading, right from their young age, and they get to grow up with it, is just a really cool thing to be able to share.
Yeah, because, eventually they're going to be the one to pick out what kind of a view I have from the nursing home. So I want to get a nice window view someday. They're most pretty good with trains. Let's let them see the trains go by, So, but, it's a great thing of the hobby. You meet some of the best people, and that's one of the great things. And my boys especially have built relationships. My youngest is in cahoots with Greg McComas and his products, and Greg will send him some new thread that he just made with Macrail, and Matthew takes some pictures and send it back to me, and then Matthew's pictures show up on Macrail's website. And my oldest and I have sat under John Parker's layout for hours at a time, looking at how everything ties in together. And John's Fall River Division BNSF layout is it's museum quality. So a lot of the things I try to do nice and neat and all my wiring is I'm trying to be like John. But we've sat underneath the layout with John, and how everything plugs together and how it goes, because my oldest is my electronics guy. And so if he can understand it, it'll happen here, And so several times we've been up to John's layout and pulled up the curtain and sat underneath the layout and took pictures, and we're all sitting underneath the layout like we're hiding from mom, and John's explaining stuff. And great story, John let my oldest dispatch on his CTC machine, because that's obviously something else we're going to do. Yeah. And so he let Matthew run a spare rail car, and so John's explaining it to Aaron, and he's like, "Now, if you throw this switch right here, your brother's going to go into the siding. Click." He's like, "Well, that's cool." And so you see the spare rail car go into the siding, on the CTC board, and then he says, "Now, if you close that switch behind him, click." And my son kind of leans back and crosses his arms. He says, I like this. My brother's in the siding and he can't get out without me. And, and, so then the spare rail car comes to the end of the siding, and Matthew's sitting there waiting on a signal, waiting on a switch, and Aaron goes and starts talking about something else with John. Meanwhile, Matthew's still sitting in the siding, and then you hear this holler come out, loud, "Hey, what about me?" And John goes, "Well, you can let him out." And Aaron looks at John and goes, "Or I can leave him there." He says, "This is really cool." And I said, "Oh, I feel the power being taken, the power has been dealt, And so the dispatcher has all the power. And in fact, the next time we went, Aaron kind of mentioned it to John. "That'd be really cool if you let Matthew run the train and I can dispatch it." And once again, he put Matthew in the siding and left him there. So there was a little bit of scheming going on there, and John was just loving it and just laughing the whole time. And just, but that's the great thing about this layout is you build relationships with guys like John Parker and William Sampson and Mike Landis and the Iowa Interstate Mafia guys and then Sammy Carlisle and Chris Palmieri and Home Shops, and then you got the official pinup girl for the NMRA, Michelle Kempema, that everybody loves Michelle. And I keep telling her, I say, I'm going to make a shirt, I'm going to make a bomber, it's going to have Michelle's face on it. It's going to be the NMRA bomber, 1943 or whatnot. But and you go up to Greeley and Michelle treats you like family, and that's, man, what a hobby. This is the greatest hobby in the world. It really is. And everybody will show you how they do everything, and you can talk to Bernard Helen at Mini Prints, or you can talk to the guys from Intermountain and just, and I don't know about you, but our vacation usually involves going to some manufacturer or something really cool in the process, and, just building those relationships that you've had for years. And now I've got another generation, because somebody's going to get this layout one day. It may turn over to a BNSF layout if my youngest has his way. Matthew is a BNSF guy, and my oldest son, Aaron, he is a Rock Island guy. So there's two 80s guys and a modern guy. So the layout can, depending on what's running, it can definitely be 1980 or it can be 2020. So it's kind of interesting. But, they have their own stuff and they have their own cars and they have their own pride in what they model. So that's really cool.
Well, you got the two kids, kind of that sibling rivalry via CTC machine is kind of a funny thought. And then you've got, modern versus, 80s. And then there's a third one in there, which is the name of it, at least for now. And I'm really interested to learn about this because you're a freelance guy with this Mesquite Belt idea, and love to know, how did that come to fruition?
Well, so back years ago, back in the late 80s, I rode EMS on every Friday out to the west of Houston in a town called Belleville, which is a Santa Fe town. Had a big yard there, still has a remnant of a yard there. And so being with EMS, I could kind of go anywhere in town I needed to, and I could rail fan between calls and so forth. And I was eating lunch at the cafe on the square and was reading the little county newspaper. And there was an article called "The Other Side of the Tracks," and it kind of grabbed my attention. I said, well, this is kind of cool. And so I started reading, and the guy that wrote it, his name was Ray L, middle initial, Head. Railhead. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be really cool. And so basically the synopsis is the guy that wrote, his name is Doug Ratchford, and he worked for the Santa Fe while he was in college. And so these are all stories from when he was working on the Santa Fe in the mid 70s to late 70s on the Santa Fe. And so he changed the names of the towns and the names of the people, not to protect the innocent, but to protect the guilty from coming back after him one day. And so like he changed Houston to the town of Hot Sun, because during the summer, Houston can be as hot as the face of the sun. And I think you kind of got a little bit of that this summer. And because guys, y'all don't know this, but Ray was melting this summer. He was like Frosty the Snowman. I was starting to feel bad for Ray because I'm melting because it was kind of hot. And so anyway, so he tells all these stories, and he referred to one story. He referred to it was actually the Cane Belt, which took off out of Sealy, which is 50 miles due west of Houston, which is where the Santa Fe and the Katy cross, and happens to be my mom's hometown. And then it would kick off in the Santa Fe and would go down to Matagorda Bay right on the Gulf Coast. And so he's telling the story that, once you clear the switch in town, it's nothing but mesquite trees all the way down. And so he nicknamed it the Mesquite Belt. And I still have that original paper that I read at lunch with that name circled, and I'm like, that's the name of the layout.
Wow.
That's it right there. Because we have the Cotton Belt, and cotton's a major crop within the South. And then you have the Mesquite Belt, which, mesquite trees and barbecue, that's about as Texany as you can get. And I'm like, Mesquite Belt, man, that sounds railroady. And now I just need to come up with a logo. Yep. And about that time in the late 80s, that's when SP went to the speed letter logo. And then I have a real good friend of mine. He and I are kind of brothers from another mother, gentleman by the name of Jeff Ford, who works for the BNSF. And Jeff was at school at Texas Tech, and we were friends, and through the Lubbock Mall Railroad Club that I've been members of before. And Jeff's like, why don't you do Mesquite Belt in an SP speed letter font? I was like, that's it. And then It all magically came together. And then Jeff had some abilities with computer programming through school, and magically the logo showed up, and we kind of refined it a little bit. And then it went to an Alps printer, and ta-da, we had decals, and man, we were rolling cold at that time. And it just kind of took off. And so it's kind of a Texany over umbrella over the whole layout. I mean, it's obviously what I model is the Katy, but it's all mesquite trees along this whole line. So, it kind of is the Mesquite Belt. And Mesquite Belt's just kind of a cool phrase. So Mesquite Belt it was, and Mesquite Belt it's been since 1989.
Nice. So the Mesquite Belt in a depot in the backyard of your home in Palestine, Texas. Why don't you walk us through what you've got now in the depot and what you've built in that 20-year period that this building has been in the backyard?
So the layout is a linear layout. Everywhere you look, to the left is north and to the right is south. The layout is totally linear, so it doesn't go in a tunnel and pop out on the other side of the room or anything like that. And you definitely get your exercise walking. But we start off in Houston. We're going to start off on the south side. And so we start off in Houston, and we go north through Houston, and then come up through Sealy. And then from Sealy, we go north, and we come into Cat Spring, and then LaGrange. LaGrange is the town of the infamous ZZ Top song. And of course, ZZ Top's a good Texas group.
Oh, for sure.
And then we come into Smithville, and Smithville is a yard on the Katy, a pretty extensive yard. But it's also home for the Lower Colorado River Authority shops, which the Lower Colorado River Authority power plant is about 20 miles north of Smithville. And that powers most of Austin and most of central Texas. And so they have car shops for their coal car fleet. And Smithville has been a Katy yard for, 100 some odd years. And then we come around through Taylor, where we interchange with the Mopac, and then we come through Granger, and then we interchange with the Georgetown Railroad, and Georgetown Railroad is a major ag line in Texas. And then from there we go north into Temple, Texas, and from Temple we go into Waco, home of Baylor University and Chip and Joanna Gaines fame.
Yep.
And the silos that a lot of people are probably familiar with from Chip and Joanna, that is on the Katy layout. That is on the line. That rail line that you see sometimes in the shots, that is the Katy right there in Waco.
Wow.
And then from Waco we go north into Fort Worth, and we have a huge elevator that's about 6 or 7 feet long, and a major grain elevator. And then we come through Tower 55, and then from Tower 55 we come into North Yard in Fort Worth. And the North Yard in Fort Worth and the Eureka Yard in Houston are all tied together. So when you walk in the layout, you see a 32-foot long yard. That's all yard, and it's actually 40 feet from wall to wall. But by the time you get through the throats and all that yard is actually 32 feet long.
Wow.
So you get that big, massive look of a yard that's, prototypically it looks right. And I give credit to that to the Amarillo Model Railroad guys, because their modular group, they had a big yard, and I was like, yeah, I got to have that too. So definitely had a bucket list of, I had a punch list of need a big yard, and I want big curves, and I want this, and I want that, and I need a depot, and I need the right wife, and I need cool kids that know how to work power tools, and they're going to work to get everything done. And it just went real well, and now my boys are in their 20s and know how to use any kind of power tool there is, and my daughter's pretty handy with tools, and so I like to think I've made some progress in the right way and getting them some good life skills. And everybody knows how to solder and flux and re-rail cars. Everybody knows how to clean track, obviously.
Yeah.
Because 800 square feet of track, that's a lot of scrubbing.
Yes, it is.
And so there's a lot of maintenance issues, and then you get into the whole DCC side and programming and all that jazz. And hey, Dad, this guy's engine does this. I want mine to do that. How do we make that happen? I don't know. Let me ask Ray how he did that, and then we'll figure out how to go from there. And everybody's wanting to share everything,
Sure.
And again, that's one of the great things of the hobby. And we've made friends with a lot of the guys in the manufacturing side. Matt Gentry and my youngest, Matthew, they're pretty good buddies. Matt's with Rapido, and Matt's just handed him the throttle on one of his trains before. And Dad, I'm running Matt Gentry's train. Okay, well, don't derail it and don't break it. So that's cool. And it's just a great hobby, and it's a great family time spent together. And my sons have grown up with friends that were always at train shows, and now they're all out of college. And every now and then we'll run into one at a yard rail fanning, as an adult, and we could just drive off and leave him, and eventually he'll come home. But it's just there's I get text messages and pictures of check this out, or I found this, or whatnot, or this is coming, because now we have all the apps, and everybody can chase all the heritage, everything, and how technology has changed. Because you and I are from the non-cell phone generation, and before pagers were around, and
Yep.
You actually had to remember people's phone numbers, and you couldn't speed dial them all the time. So
That's right.
Yeah, how rail fanning has changed over the last 30 years.
Oh, for sure. It's certainly amazing the technology it's moved forward, and not only in prototype railroading and rail fanning and model railroading. It's quite a bit. But you hit on a very great point, and I think it really boils down to those that really love the hobby of model railroading are the ones that share it. Like, you can tell who's passionately in love with model railroading, because they're the ones that want to share it with everybody, all their knowledge, everything they've gathered, and they just can't wait to help you get as excited as they are about the hobby. It's just so much fun. You talk about Michelle Kempema as exactly that, one that'll just, you can't help but be infected by her enthusiasm. And there's so many others just like that. John Parker, same thing, just a great guy who just loves to talk about his model railroad and loves to hear about yours and share stories and see you succeed just as much as he has. It's really phenomenal to find those people.
And if you do your research, and within the hobby, there are other little sub hobbies. We went to Kansas City one time, and we saw 2 Katy layouts in the same day.
Yeah,
I don't know that that's ever happened before. You can go see all the Santa Fe layouts you want to. You can go see all the Southern Pacific layouts. To see 2 Katy layouts in my era in the mid 80s to late 80s, that was just like that was like the height of the vacation for me, because I was like, we saw two of them in the same day. That is so cool, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but you've got all these guys that and then you build these relationships, or you ask a question, and then I have open invitations to, hey, next time you come to Wisconsin, you're going to come and we're going to rail fan, and then I'm going to take you to this guy's layout and this guy's layout, and you're going to get to see this. And I'm like, that's going to be a cool trip, Or my sons, when they graduated, we asked them what they wanted to do, and both of them wanted a road trip. And one of them, we were on the road for 24 days, and the other one, we
Wow.
were on the road for 23 days, 25 days, something like that. One wanted to go to the East Coast, one wanted to go to the West Coast. And so we did a big Northeast tour and got to see the Winchester Western. And we were talking to one of the higher ups with them, and he's like, Matthew, if next time you come, I'll give you a cab ride. And I'm like, oh God, now we got to come back. And then the on the other side, we got to see. He wanted to go to Canada, and we want to see Kamloops and all these places that we've seen online or read about, and that's what they want to see. They want to see this or that. And, oh, by the way, there's a big train yard here in this town. We can swing by here. It's only 20 miles out of the way, and so forth. And it's just a great hobby. And, and you look at the books that are out there and the books that have influenced us. And, I've got an Atlas custom line book that came out in 1957. It was $1, and it was John Armstrong's designs. And the last big layout, I mean, it's a 2-page layout, and I have it all color coded for where my blocks were going to be in DC, back in the day. And this is going to be a block I had all color coded out still. And now with DCC, obviously we don't need that, but the books and then the videos and kind of getting the documentation that we might not have. And then like Steve Gowen's series on the Complete Katy, where he has all these videos of the Katy all along the system. And I watch those videos of just common, ordinary day trains back from the 80s. And I'm like, oh, I don't have that car, or I need this car. And like Athearn came out with a PS2 that was yellow, and it was the PTLX, and it had every railroad that had ordered that car, and it had all the different names all over it. And guess what? On the video, there's that car rolling through.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years to find that car. And one of my best friends, Mike Ellis, for a Christmas present, he goes, I know you were looking for this car. And I'm like, now I got it, because I've got documented that it was on the Katy. And so slide collections and collecting slides, and finding guys that work for the railroad and guys that just are just a plethora of knowledge, really make the layout, to me, seem really come to life. And we had during the Katy convention, I had a Katy engineer walk through my layout, and he's like, what milepost is this? I'm like, that's 1045.7. That's the right spot. Yeah, I've gotten in the right spot, And then he looks around and he's like, that's right there, and that's right there. Well, when I have a guy that actually ran this line, and he's like, yep, I know exactly where that is. I know exactly where that is. It's not exact, but it's close enough that he knows exactly where he is on the layout.
Right.
And then he'll tell the story about, Ray almost fell off the bridge one night, walking the train.
Yep.
And then he tells that story, and then the layout comes a little bit more to life. And he, one of the greatest compliments I ever got was Willard Wood, who's the engineer. He said, Devin, he says, this was like going back in the day. And he goes, and I didn't have to work, but I could just enjoy it. And I was like, that's a great compliment.
Oh yeah.
Not to brag, but just being so appreciative that he was very appreciative of the work that had gone in to make it as right as possible, with selective compression and everything else that goes on. But he loved having the signals on there, and we talked about my talk and defect detector that we have from Boulder Creek Engineering. And
Right.
he's like, now, the Katie's never talked. I was like, oh, I know that, but mine does because it's cool.
Yeah. That's
So,
where the freelance comes in. Yeah.
yeah. So, I can cheat when I need to, but otherwise then I can kind of get the best of both worlds. And I try to be pretty close in a lot of ways, try to be a lot of details and so forth. But it still gives me a little bit of flexibility to do with what I want, and maybe highlight this town more than another town, or I need to highlight this town because this is the town where the Katy interchange with the Santa Fe, and that's important.
Right.
And so I want to have that town, and it works within the scope of the layout better than another town might, and so forth. But to kind of pick and choose and to be able to, I'm no farther than 3 hours away from any point on my layout in the prototype. And over the years, I've done a lot of documentation and photographs that things change. Bridges get changed out, signs get removed. And so, that 80s era stuff is disappearing really quickly. And now I look back at, there are some buildings that I documented that were next to the layout, and those buildings have been bulldozed and new condominiums built and so forth. So that's changed, but I've got documentation of what it did look like. And so that's nice to be close enough where I can drive to any part of my layout in a couple hours and take photographs. And I've done that over the last 25 years where I really kind of have a blank spot between point A and point B, and I need to document pictures and trees and all that kind of stuff to get the right look. So if I were to drop you on the layout, or if somebody who's really familiar with the layout, with the track the way it is, would know where he's at, so that's kind of cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Before we run out of time, I definitely want to bring up one other thing that is really been neat for the Mesquite Belt. There's also a way now to get the Mesquite Belt on your layout, which is an announcement that was made, I think, just only a few weeks ago. Why don't you tell us about this thing you've been working with Mr. Chris Palmieri?
So Chris Palmieri is the owner of Home Shops, and we actually met at the Red River RPM, the Dallas-Fort Worth RPM that's been up and going now for the last 3 years. And he saw some of my work, and he's like, hey, so I've got this new company coming out. We're doing all these cars, and I want you to do some weathering for me on the Ambassador fleet. And, we talked about, taking things from other people's layouts. Dan Arnold is a great weathering guy, kind of like Rob Arsenault, and just incredible weathering that they do. And Dan does a lot of grain cars, and he does some ground ginger on top for spilt corn. And Chris really liked it. And then Chris and I talked, and so Home Shops is coming out with 4427s done up in the Mesquite Belt. We had did a special paint scheme for them. They are Mesquite Belt blue and have the Mesquite Belt logo on them. One car ends in 343. That's obviously for the brothers that fell at Fire Department of New York on 9/11, and just acknowledging their tremendous sacrifice on that day. But we've got 2 car numbers. There's 144 cars that were produced. Talked to Chris last week, and a third of them are already sold. So kind of excited about that. I didn't want to be the car that nobody wanted. So knowing that those cars are being sold, but they're Tangent 4427s. And on the side of the car, there you'll see a six-pointed star on there. And one of my best friends, my lifelong best friend, Steve Dennis, is a retired Harris County Sheriff's Deputy from Houston. And he does model trains, and our kind of little thing is that he owns a rail company that does all my quote unquote painting for my railroad. So you'll see that little shield down there on the side of the car, and that's kind of in honor of him and him putting up with me his whole life. But his company, Dennis Rail Services, supposedly painted all these cars because they're repainted cars, and so that's why that's on there. And really, really excited. really honored that Chris would do the Mesquite Belt cars, and I'm sure Greg McCombs is going to want me to put some friends and some flags on the back of him and do some promo shots, and that's okay. I wouldn't mind at all, but it's a real honor to do that and to be asked to be part of this really neat idea that Chris has. And in this release, there's also the Camp Mountain car from David Burrow, the Camp Mountain Santa Fe, which was really iconic back in the 80s and 90s. And really, David was a big pusher of the linear track plan and so forth. And I've been blessed to know Mr. Burrow for 35 years, I guess now, and to run the original Cat Mountain and so forth. And he's now 91 years old. So some of these guys we grew up with, they're getting up there in age, and like we lost Alan McClellan. That was a huge loss to the hobby,
right?
And that just nothing is forever, but these guys really had a huge influence on a whole genre of us guys, and to be in the same release as him, I'm really honored, and to be in a group with the guys that you've had on your podcast. Either you've gotten to the end of the list, or I'm getting up there in rank, one of the two.
The latter, for sure.
The folks that you've had on the podcast, they are all people that I just look up to, and if I can get an idea from them and take something that they do and run with it, I'm going to try to. And but homeshops.net, Chris, I'll appreciate the plug. They are on pre-sale right now for $50 and change. MSRP is like $58. And Home Shops is a really neat idea within the hobby to do these proto freelance cars and to get a car from other people's layouts on your layout. And Chris has some really cool associated things with the Home Shops folks, and we've seen the whole do not load Home Shops for repair stickers on all the cars, and you get some really cool stuff in the package. And if you buy a Mesquite Belt car, you're going to get your very own fountain pen with the Mesquite Belt on it. I told Chris I'd throw that in there, a little bit of bling. You and the guys, when y'all came down, you and Don and Mark came, y'all got a pin or two to go with it. So
yep.
You can have a little bit of extra bling with it. And, that's the other thing within the hobby. Now everybody's got stickers and hats and T-shirts, and man, you don't even need to go to the store and buy clothes. You can just wear layout stuff, or model train stuff, or, whatnot. And you got like Mohawk that makes some really cool train-related T-shirts and whatnot. And if you have an idea, just send it to them and they'll make your shirt.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool, So the hobby, it's not just running trains anymore. There's the prototype guys, there's the operations guys, there's the weathering guys, there's the guys that do the merchandising and all of that, and it's just a cool, different, the hobby is, the model railroad hobby is like a tree, and then there's branches, and then off those branches come other branches, and there's all these little leaves out there of different specific areas within the hobby. If it's weathering or DCC or programming or signals or prototype ops or this, that, and the other, and then you get off into the historical documentation and slides and pictures and all that, because you can't go take pictures of it now anymore. Where the Katy Yard was in Dallas is the main road going up to the American Airlines Center in downtown Dallas. So that whole rail yard is gone, but you can walk past the buildings that are in every Katy shot in Dallas, and that's where Dick's Last Resort is, and where Hooters is, and all that. And I know people that are real familiar with Dallas, and I'll show them a picture from the Katy. I'm like, there's the buildings, there's the main line, and they're like, but this is a street. Yeah, well, it wasn't always a street.
Right.
It was the Katy at one point.
Right.
So it's the best hobby in the world. It really is.
Well, I'll tell you what makes it the best hobby in the world is guys like you, Devin. And I'll tell you that the hospitality that was shown to myself and Don Irace and Mark Herrick when we visited your layout during the convention, I don't think the three of us felt more like celebrities than when we walked into your layout and the way you treated us, the hospitality from you and your sons and even your wife. And we were just thrilled to be able to share that with you. And the way you made us feel was just so appreciated. And then, listen, this whole honor with Home Shops of getting you is well deserved. You've come up with a fantastic scheme. You're again, this is going to be great to have on any layout. Beautiful car, very well done. Freelance railroad, the concept, just really, really great. And I'm looking forward to having my Mesquite Belt car on my layout. And then thank you for sharing not only the details that you've put into all of that, but just your story in general. Just amazing what you've been able to do with your family and then share it with the whole model railroading family is just really something that's to be admired. And I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight to share that story.
Well, Ray, I appreciate what you do. I mean, you're a great media point to share these stories and get them out there. And, you know, the guys you've talked to, like Michael Landis and some of the other Katie guys and Sammy Carlisle and all these guys that, you know, it's great to hear those stories and to have somebody facilitate that like you. And whenever I get out into the layout room and I'm weathering and all that, I'm listening to a podcast because it's like I'm hanging out with the guys and hearing stories and learning stuff. And it's great because not only are you learning from these other guys, but you can always reach out to them and they're like, hey, if you're ever in my state or down around my area, give me a holler and I'd love to have you and host you. And my wife loves to do the baking and everything. And, you know, the rule is if you don't sign the guest book, you don't get sweets, and you don't get sweets, you don't get in the layout. So she kind of has you no matter what. And she's a great gatekeeper and you know, she enjoys it. And now that she's retired, she gets to do more of it. And the food is always my request. And we have some guys that ask her if she will just make another loaf of cinnamon bread just for them to take with them and so forth. So we try to treat people right and show them a little love while they're down here. And, you know, and that's the way I was raised when we first got to layouts, you know, hey, you're more than welcome here and whatever you need and so forth. And that's the great thing about the hobby, you know. If I'm ever in Colorado and need something, I know I can call John Parker or Michelle Kimpema or whatnot, you know, and they'll come bail me out if I need help or whatnot. And that's just part of the great thing of the hobby, you know, and just these relationships we build and we get to learn from each other. And I think it all raises the bar for all of us to be better modelers.
I couldn't agree more. And it's my honor and pleasure to be able to share stories of folks just like you. And you certainly are more than worthy of being one of those stories, along with all those great names that you listed. So does Devin Jackson. So thanks again, Devin, for being on the show.
Thanks, Ray. Have a great week, and can't wait to come up and see you one of these days.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Around the Layout. Learn more about today's show on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Around the Layout. Show your support by becoming an operating crew member at patreon.com/Around the Layout podcast. Past episodes and more can be found on our website, aroundthelayout.com. And send us your feedback, aroundthelayout@gmail.com. Thanks for hanging out with us around the layout.
There's three gods in Texas: the Almighty Himself, Buster Welch, and George Strait. You just met one of them.
That's not George Strait.